Let's understand typecasting in Python. Typecasting, also known as type conversion, is the process of converting one data type to another. Python provides built-in functions to help us with this. For example, let's say we have a variable called x, and there we have a string which is 10. So as you can see, 10 is in between double quotations. That means it's a string. Now we can check what is the type of this x. So if we write the print function, and if we call the type function, and in between parentheses, if we pass x and run the code, you can see the type of x is string. Even though it looks like a number, we need to convert it to an integer if we want to perform mathematical operations. For that, typecasting is necessary. Python provides two types of typecasting: implicit typecasting and explicit typecasting. So first, let's see what is implicit typecasting. So Python automatically converts data types when there is no risk of losing information. For example, let's say we have a variable called num_int, and here we have a number 5. Then let's say we have decimal_num, and that is 2.5. And let's say we want to calculate the sum of these two variables. So let's say we have another variable called result, and here we have numInt plus decimal int. Now if I print result and also print type of result, so the type function, and in between parentheses I give result, and run the code, you can see the result is 7.5 and the type of result is a float. So here Python converts 5 from an integer to a float before performing the addition. But then sometimes Python doesn't automatically convert types, so we have to do it manually using some functions provided by Python. For example, we have int function which converts something to integer, then we have float function which converts something to float, and then we have string function or the str function which converts something to string. So let's see how those work. So before that, I'm gonna clean this code and declare another variable called x equal 10, then another variable y equal, then I'm gonna call the int function, and I'm gonna pass x there in between parentheses. Here x is string, but when I pass x into int, then it turns string 10 to integer 10 and store that in the variable y. So now if I write the print function, and if I try to print x, then again in the print function, if I try to print y, let's see what it prints. So I'm gonna run the code. You can see both prints 10. So now you can ask that if both prints similar things, why it is necessary to convert the types? Well, this is because if I want to do some mathematical calculations with x, it won't work because that is a string. For example, if I want to print x plus 5 means string 10 plus 5, and if I run the code, you can see it throws error. It says can only concatenate string to string, not integer. But after converting x into int and storing in y, we have an integer 10 in y, so we can do mathematical calculations with y. So if I write here print y plus 5, then if I run the code, you can see it prints 15. That means type conversion plays a crucial role in programming. Let's take another example. Let's say we have another variable called z equal 3.14. Then we have another variable called w, and let's say here we call the string function and we pass z in between parentheses. So if we print w and run the code, you can see it prints 3.14, but it is a floating point number. But when I run the string function and pass z there, it turns the string into a floating number and then stores that in w. So if I write the print statement again, and if I call the type function and pass w and run the code, you can see the type is string. Again, the reason is, if you want to write the z with a string, or you want to do a concatenation, it will throw error. But when you turn it into a string and store that in w, you can do concatenation with string and w. But for example, if you want to turn a letter into a number, that is not allowed. So for example, if you have a variable called x, and there you store the value called Twitter, and then you take another variable, and for example, you want to convert this string to integer or float, that is not allowed. So if you write the int function and pass x and run the code, it will throw error, because with common sense you can understand that these are letters, these are not numbers. So to convert a string to integer or float, that string must contain only numbers. So understanding that string must contain numbers or digits, it should not contain letters. Then this int or float function cannot convert the types. Another use case I want to share, that is, if you have a variable called x equal integer 10, then if you write the print statement, and here if you write the int function, and in between parentheses if you pass x and run the code, you can see it prints 10. And after the print statement, if I write the print statement again, and if I call the type function, and in the parentheses if I pass x and run the code, you can see still it is string. But you can say here I made it an integer, but when I try to print the type of x, it shows string. That is because when you convert a data into another type, you must need to store that in a variable, otherwise that won't work properly. So you must have to use another variable to store the new converted integer, then you have to use that variable. So now if you run the code, you can see the type is int. Now we can do some typecasting with user input as well. For example, we are taking some input from user, for example num1 means number 1, and we write the input function, and here we tell the user to input a number. Then let's say we have another input with the name num2, and the placeholder would be give another number. Then we can take a result variable, and there we can do num1 plus num2. Then if I call the print function and try to print result, let's see what it prints. If I run the code, you can see it asks for a number, so let's give 12, then hit enter. It's asked for another number, we can give 13 here. Then you can see it does not add two numbers. The result should be 25, but it is showing 1213. So what it did is it implicitly made num1 and num2 string. Instead of adding those two numbers, Python concatenate those two numbers, because those are strings if we consider as a data type. So as they are strings, Python concatenate them, but we expect Python should add them, treating them as integers, not string. So for that, what we can do is we can write here the int function and pass num1, and again here we can call the int function and pass num2. And now if I run the code, It will ask for a number, give it 12 again, and give it 13. You can see the correct input 23. Now it is working correctly because now this is a number and this is also a number. So it did the mathematical addition operation. Before those were strings, that's why Python concatenate them instead of adding them.